How are you? Thanks for clicking into this video. This is how long should my novel be? And the reason I'm doing this video is because people seem to ask me this question on a much more regular basis than I ever thought they would. And I think they ask it because there's a mix of information on the internet about how long novels should be, and that's simply because there are so many different genres of novel, and your word count should be dependent upon which genre you are wishing to write in. So I'm just going to put my cards on the table now. If you're interested in writing children's books, this video isn't going to suit you. So what I'm going to cover here is short stories, novellas, and then the lengths for different types of fiction such as young adult, and then fantasy and sci-fi, as well as romance, and then all the different types of thriller like horror or crime or psychological thriller. And then just at the end of the video, I'm going to go through how long your synopsis would be, which is a question that's often asked of me too, just to see out the video. So it won't be too long. If you wish to write any of the genres I've just mentioned, stick with me. I'm going to give you the exact word counts you should be aiming for your particular genre. So why don't we just roll the open author log sting and get to this video. Here we go. Okay, so how long should my novel be? If you've ever asked yourself even that question or Googled that question, have no fear, I have the answers here for you straight away. So let's start with short stories. So short stories should really be somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 in word count. So we are dealing with word count constantly, not necessarily pages. People ask how many pages it should be. You really should be just concentrating on the word count because people seem to fit different word counts into different pages depending on what font size they write in, depending on how much space they give their sentences in between the sentences. So you might have double spacing, you might have 1.5 spaces, so you might not have any spacing at all. I recommend 1.5 space, but I know this isn't necessarily the video for that, and if you use 1.5 space, you're probably going to fit about 500 words into any one page on a regular sort of 12-point font size. So short stories, 5 to 10,000 words, and the sweet spot you should be aiming for on a short story is 7,000. Now that's not to say that you should be looking to reach that exactly or even close to that. As I said, the range for a short story is somewhere between 5 to 10,000 words. And that's what would be acceptable for any publishers or agents out there. Now we're going to talk about novellas next before we get into the more young adult and adult books. And novellas should have a word count range of between 10 to 40,000 because novellas are, indistinguishable really in terms of word count. That's why it's such a wide ranging there. But if you are looking for a particular sweet spot, the average novella sort of comes in at around 25,000 words, so that's what you should be aiming at to come in right on the sweet spot. Now, if you want to write young adult books, which is known as YA books, as you can see there in my logo, so these are books aimed at age ranges of maybe 16 to early 20s, mid 20s. So books such as The Hunger Games or even Twilight, which preceded that. So they are somewhere between 45 and 85,000 words, with the sweet spot being about 70,000. That's what you should be looking at if you want to write YA. Now we're going to move into more adult books and all the different genres that go with adult books. And we'll actually start with fantasy, which is one of the most written genres out there. So these fall between 90 to 130,000 words, and fantasy is one of the biggest word counts in terms of genre. Their books tend to be thicker, they tend to be longer, and the sweet spot you might be looking at for a fantasy novel would be over 100,000. So about 110,000 is the average for a fantasy novel, and as I did mention, that is one of the highest. In fact, it is the highest. The only one that comes quite close to it is sci-fi, and we'll talk about sci-fi now. So science fiction should be somewhere between, again, it's the high range, 90 to 120,000 words. And again, you should be looking over 100,000 for the sweet spot. 105,000 is what I've calculated is the average science fiction novel. Now, if you wish to write a romance novel, this is quite wide ranging. So you should be looking somewhere between 50 and 100,000, with the sweet spot being about 80,000 is what the average is for a romance novel. Now we're going to talk about thrillers, which is the biggest selling genre, but also the most written genre, just above fantasy, as I mentioned earlier on. So when we talk about thrillers, we could be talking about different subgenres within the thriller genre, but they do all fall under similar expected word counts. So we might be talking about horror, if you want to write like Stephen King, a horror thriller, or if you want to write more psychological thrillers like Paula Hawkins, or if you want to write crime thrillers like the great Michael Connelly. They all sort of fall under the thriller genre. And what you should be looking at here is somewhere between 75 to 120,000 words, with the sweet spot being 90,000. So I guess, in short, if you are thinking about writing a young adult novel, as I mentioned, the sweet spot is about 70,000 is what you should probably have in mind as a rough estimate. You don't have to reach that, or if you go over it, it's fine as well. But just the conscious number of 70,000 should be what you have in mind for young adult. And then for any adult novel after that, whether it be fantasy, sci-fi, romance, thriller, you're looking at around probably the 90,000 word counts should be what you're conscious of. But there are slight differences in the different genres, as I've just mentioned there. Now, you know, you're probably not at this stage yet, but a lot of people ask me how long their synopsis should be when they are submitting to agents or publishers. So a synopsis is a breakdown of your whole entire plot, and if you can fit it into one page, that's what's acceptable from a publisher or an agent. So you should really be looking at somewhere between 400 and 1,000 words. But the actual sweet spot, some agents and publishers do take 1,000 words, but more often than not, they're asking for one page. So the sweet spot is actually 500 words is what you should be aiming for on your synopsis. Okay, so if you have any further questions or you want me to break that information down for you any further, do comment below. If not, you don't have any more questions but you would like to see more of my videos, do subscribe, hit that red button below as well, and please do visit theopenauthor.com to see the array of information I have for people who are starting out in writing or people who have been writing but are frustrated and trying to find that publishing deal or that agent. There's loads of information on my website for you. So thanks for tuning into this video. I hope it's helped in some way. I'll see you around.